Today we're going to be talking about the 6 methods in which we can implement conditioning and cardio for strength athletes without interfering with gains. Hello everyone, welcome back. I'm John from Strength Forge. Today we're going to be taking you through the 6 methods of how we can implement conditioning and cardio, improve your cardiovascular fitness without necessarily interfering with strength gains. Now, it's a topic that isn't necessarily covered in as much detail, at least from a programming standpoint, in the world of strength, because we're obviously all interested in getting stronger. And a lot of people fail to realise that conditioning, or at least cardiovascular fitness, upholds, or is at least part of the foundation of how much training you can effectively recover from, and therefore has a direct influence on your abilities. So, I'm not going to be telling you to do CrossFit to get fit, don't worry. There is a little bit of science behind it in terms of what goes on underneath the hood, so to speak, how the body responds to different methods of training, and ultimately how this is going to influence the programming. So the first thing that we need to kind of discuss and cap straight away is the cross-interference effect with mTOR. Now, it's the rationale as to why cardio kills your gains. The notion that when we undergo an anabolic stimulus, whether it be the ingestion of leucine or the experience of mechanical tension within the muscle, there is a neurotransmitter release known as mammalian target of rapamycin, also known as mTOR, that helps to convert the process of, or convert the mechanical tension into an anabolic response. And there is studies to show that if you were to perform the resistance training or induce an anabolic response within the body and then undergo some form of cardiovascular activity, that there is an interference effect or a dampening of the mTOR response, which ultimately inhibits this anabolic pathway. Is the truth to this? Well, yes, empirically there is obviously evidence to suggest that this takes place. However, as is the case with most empirical research, the key is context and whether or not this applies to you as an individual. In the world of strength, okay, you need to take into account, or the world of physical training in general, you need to take into account the amount of training volume you're doing. If you are performing 70% of your work within that given session as cardiovascular activity, and it is long, slow, and catabolic in nature, then yes, it's going to interfere with your anabolic response. However, if you tag on a 20-minute bike ride as part of a session, whether it be at the start or the end, it's not going to kill your gains. It's not going to nullify all of the anabolic response that your body has just experienced from the 2 hours prior. So we need to keep this in mind, but we also need to understand, before we go into any conditioning modalities, is understanding the energy systems. Just as a brief outlay, we have 3 main energy systems within the body that yield us our energy currency, which is ATP. We have the aerobic energy system, we have the lactic acid energy system, or the lactate energy system, also known as anaerobic glycolysis, which we'll touch on in a moment, and then we have the ATP-PC system. The aerobic system is characterized by the oxidation of substrates, so fat and carbs can be broken down within the presence of oxygen, and that yields a significant amount of energy. Once the intensity or the demand for oxygen outweighs the supply, we go into anaerobic glycolysis, in which the substrates only takes place with carbs, unfortunately, because the beta oxidation pathway in which fat is broken down requires the presence of oxygen, whereas we do have an anaerobic glycolytic pathway in which we can break down carbs, yield slightly less energy, but also produce the byproduct of pyruvic acid, which then is converted into lactic acid. That's that burning feeling you get within the muscles. The ATP-PC system is your short burst system. So this is your 1 rep max right the way through to sprinting 100 meters. It typically only lasts about 8 seconds. Now, we're not necessarily interested within the ATP-PC system as of yet, simply because we tend to get that energy system taken care of with a lot of the high rep work that you'll do within your training. So we're more interested in aerobic and lactic acid energy systems. What are the things that we need to be aware of? Well, first of all, the timing of your training. I always recommend for people to perform their conditioning depending on the intensity that you will do it in, which we'll touch on in a moment. I always recommend to get that done at the start for 3 reasons. Number 1, if you're so unfit that you think that cardio at the start of your session will kill the rest of your session, cardio is your priority, okay? It shouldn't be to the point where it is absolutely killing you off. So everyone seems to turn around and say, oh, well, I want to save my energy for the legs, and I want to save the... If a 20-minute bike ride is going to kill you off, then you need to, this is coming from a strength athlete and coming from a strength coach, you need to bench the squats for a while, pun intended, and you need to focus on cardio, okay? It's purely about improving your cardiovascular fitness, but it's not the focus. So it's not that I'm asking you to go at an intensity that's so high that it's going to kill off the rest of your session, but it is also beneficial when it comes to warming you up. Reason number 2, spending that time at the start of the session means you're going to get it done. Simply put, there's far too many times, myself included, if I tag cardio onto the end of someone's session, they won't do it. They'll kill themselves off with the lifting, which is their priority, so 100% I agree with that, within reason. But then they just won't do the cardio because all of a sudden, they have to get home early and they have to do this. Yeah, they're not going to do that if that's their last set of deadlifts, are they? So fundamentally, if you get it done at the start, it means it's boxed off. And then finally, number 3, it preps your body for training. It's part of a warm-up, okay? There's far too many times that I see people go, yep, I'm going to get ready for a session now, so I'm going to deadlift. So what I'll do is I'll walk in, I'll slap, start with 60 kilos on the bar, do a few sets, do some aggressive, dynamic stretching where I twist and I touch my toes and then bang, I'm ready to go. It's not the case. A warm-up is something that is actually systematic and should be included to prime your nervous system and obviously prep your joints and muscles for training. So the cardio is the perfect place to do that. So we've talked about the timing of your conditioning and your cardiovascular based training. Next is to cover the volume and be aware that, like I said earlier, the amount of training that you do is ultimately the direction in which your body will respond. So if we take the Pareto's law, which is 80-20, as a general starting point, and oftentimes you can actually go a little bit lower than this, provided that 80% of your training comes from heavy lifting and the typical strength work that you will see, and no more than 20% comes from your conditioning, you'll be absolutely fine. Okay, again, it won't interfere with your results. If anything, it will in fact improve them because you've got this base from which you can recover. Ultimately, volume is a key driver behind the growth of strength, particularly, or the growth of muscle, particularly within natural individuals, people that aren't taking performance enhancing drugs. So we want to be able to tolerate the maximum amount of volume possible. And another thing that you need to keep in mind when it comes to conditioning is we often forget this in the world of strength, whether it's because the pre-existing knowledge that we had came from the geared powerlifting world, or whether it's just down to the nature of those individuals. You've still got to be healthy, okay? Specialising in sport isn't necessarily a healthy thing to do, we know this. It's a common line to say that if you want to be healthy, don't compete. But ultimately, even if you do want to, you still need to protect the downside and focus on what your health is doing. It's far too common to see people that are in the pursuit of getting stronger either put on weight unnecessarily that they don't need, their blood pressure's through the roof, and again, they just simply don't have cardiovascular fitness. There is some merit and some truth to the typical kind of primary school even level education that we got when it came to understanding the balance between different fitness components. And although we know fundamentally that strength is the precursor to all of them and strength is the focal point of what everyone's training should be, you still can't dismiss the importance of things like cardiovascular fitness for heart health and general respiratory. So what we need to bear in mind is with the different types of conditioning, how are we characterising these 3 different energy systems and how are we characterising how that training differs. So aerobic energy system training is anything that is slow, steady or long duration and low intensity in nature. Now this can be cyclical work on a bike, or it can be generally going for a walk, or like a hike or something like that. Something that doesn't necessarily get you massively out of breath and keeps your heart rate relatively low, albeit higher than what it is at rest. This can be performed for a longer duration, as I said, so again you need to take into account how this influences your total training volume. It's really easy to tip the scales slightly higher than the 80-20 rule if you're only focusing on aerobic energy system work. You have lactic acid energy system training, so this is your interval work. This is the stuff that makes you feel like you want to puke. What I would recommend for this is a work to rest ratio of 1:1, 2:1, or at most 3:1. So 30 seconds rest, 30 seconds work, 10 seconds rest. Main reason, if you go beyond that, it's not truly going to be very lactate in nature. You're going to be sacrificing a little bit of the intensity that you can work within, purely just because of the limitation of your recovery. You've also got the ATP-PC system. Like I said, this is typically taken care of within your high rep work within the gym. However, you can employ conditioning with the work to rest ratio of 1:2, 1:3 or higher. So again, this time it'll be 10 seconds work, 20 or 30 seconds rest, if not higher, is to avoid the lactic acid burn. Now, I know that sounds counterintuitive, but the production of the lactic acid, okay, it's a byproduct. It's not necessarily the driving mechanism behind improving your fitness. So you don't need to feel that significant burn within the muscle. It obviously depends and links back to complexity. It depends on what exercise you're going to be doing within that conditioning modality, but you don't want it to interfere with the intermuscular coordination of other movements. So what do I mean by that? Well, basically, when you perform any exercise within the strength training sphere, so to speak, so any movement that you want to have skillful coordination and neuromuscular execution within, you want to make sure that you are doing everything you can to keep that movement clean, so to speak. If you perform that movement within a conditioning-based setting, okay, the interference between the hydrogen ions that are brought about as a byproduct within the kind of lactic acid energy system, they interfere and they compete with other ions during the neuromuscular junction, and they can actually alter intermuscular coordination. So that's a lot of fancy words to say that lactic acid energy system can break down your technique. And you need to remember that your technique isn't just external. It's not how it looks on the outside, it's internal as well. It's how muscles fire and in what order. So if you're performing these movements under significant amounts of lactate-based fatigue, it's going to hinder your strength. This is the primary issue that I have with CrossFit, okay? And it's the reason why a lot of CrossFit athletes at the upper echelon of their performance won't do high rep Olympic weightlifting movements. They will split them. They will do Olympic weightlifting movements on their own and combine it with a conditioning-based exercise, but they will still respect the strength training movement, and that's something that you need to bear in mind. So within things like one of the movements that we'll talk about afterwards being barbell complexes, you need to keep in mind the notion of staying as far away from the movements that you want to get strong within, whilst also being able to train certain muscular patterns that will contribute towards your performance. So for example, your posterior chain, having a high amount of durability within this kind of area of your body will transfer over to improving your squats and your deadlift and how much volume you can tolerate. So enough of the science, let's talk about the 6 methods and how we can implement them. Number 1, neat. Neat. If there is one thing you take away from this video, it is non-exercise activity thermogenesis, or in other words, just move, okay? I see far too many people, it's a plight of the modern society anyway, that people just don't move as much anymore. They sit down for prolonged periods of time, you know, they don't have physical activity that goes beyond the typical recommendation. If you're not hitting your 10,000 steps a day, or at least close to that, I know certain people that genuinely hit 3,000 steps a day, which is appalling, okay? There is nothing else to go around that. You need to increase your overall activity levels. That in turn, not only will it improve your cardiovascular health, okay, because you're moving, but there's also a very strong and positive correlation between NEAT and general healthiness within your lifestyle. People that tend to move more also tend being the key word, but also tend to have better decision-making capabilities within things like their diet. So just bear that in mind. If you increase your NEAT, other biomarkers of your health will improve as well, and you will also improve your overall cardiovascular fitness and therefore conditioning for strength. But that's not necessarily as sexy as people might like to hear. So we'll talk about the ones in which we can implement them within given sessions. First one, timed rest. Now the beauty of this one is you don't need to separate it from your initial training. You can just bring attention to your rest times. To be brutally honest with you, you don't need, okay, unless you're in a max strength block and your absolute focus is pushing the upper echelon of your true maximum neurological strength, you don't need more than 5 minutes rest in between sets, okay? Now I know a couple of the Soviet recommendations and the old school kind of super training recommendations state that 10 minutes is sometimes what people need. It is for Olympic athletes and people that are truly either A, at their peak performance, or B, have way too much time on their hands, okay? Being realistic, not only will this improve your cardiovascular fitness, but it will also improve your training economy, meaning that the sessions will get done at a shorter duration. You can either add in more work or you can leave the gym earlier. Bringing conscious awareness, even if it's just looking at a clock, bringing conscious awareness to the amount of time you spend between exercises is a great way to introduce the notion of conditioning. Barbell complexes are giant sets. So barbell complexes, they are basically a circuit performed with a barbell. It might be an RDL into a bent over row, into a clean, into a press. Performing 5 reps of each, one after the other. Trust me, if you do 5 sets of that, you'll be blowing out of your ass, and it is a very, very difficult thing to do, but it's a great way of introducing GPP, getting you exposed to different movements with the barbell, and also improving your conditioning. One thing I will stress with that, like I said earlier, is try and stay away from the movements that are similar to the ones you want to get strong within. So if you want to get strong within your squat, try and avoid using a barbell back squat within a barbell complex. Dynamic strongman events. If you're a strongman, dynamic events are a key area in which you can develop your fitness. Doing things like loaded carries, farmer's walks for distance, yoke walks are key aspects of being able to improve your fitness, and it tends to take care of all of these energy systems because they coexist. So when you're recovering between sets of a yoke walk, it will also recruit your aerobic energy system to try and improve your recovery rate. If you aren't familiar with strongman events, okay, and even if you are, to be fair, but if you aren't familiar with strongman events, I would still try and recommend performing derivatives of strongman movements. Just keep the load a little bit lighter because you're unfamiliar with those with the specific techniques. But they train postural muscles and they have a kind of global systemic demand rather than it just being localized to certain body parts. Interval work, so we've kind of touched on this already with the 1-to-1, 1-to-2 type of thing, but bringing in the notion of interval work, it allows you to get conditioning in over a shorter period of time. Interval work, doing 10 sets, 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off, that's 10 minutes boxed off, and it's going to be at a higher intensity than your typical 20-minute bike ride. And then finally, blood shunting. So blood shunting is a favourite of mine, essentially where you pair an upper body and a lower body exercise. You perform them for higher reps at lighter weights and you perform them one after the other. So it doesn't need to be any rest, okay? You can literally go one after the other. Main benefit of this, keeps your body moving. It's a high muscular demand because you can choose exercises that are exclusively just utilising weight, okay? Performing a set of leg extensions, for example. I know it's a blasphemous exercise, but performing a set of leg extensions along with a set of standing dumbbell press, your legs are able to recover whilst you're doing the dumbbell press and vice versa. So it's a great way of increasing the amount of training volume within certain body parts, okay? You'll be blowing out your ass by the end of it, trust me, and you'll also get that extra kind of adaptation of improving your conditioning. So just to summarise, conditioning is important. It upholds how well you can recover from training as well as the overall training volume that you'll perform. The three different energy systems, the ATP, PC, the lactic acid energy system and the aerobic energy system, you want to expend a little bit of time training each of them. Increase your NEAT, okay, that is a key factor to be aware of because it overall improves biomarkers of health in general, even if it's not in reference to training. Be aware of the training volume, okay, and the fact that you should adhere roughly to the 80-20 principle, 80% of your work being strength, 20% being conditioning. As a recommendation, try and perform your conditioning either on separate days, okay, because that allows you to completely separate them and you will nullify the risk of any cross interference. But the often issue that we have with this is people just don't approach those training sessions with the same amount of intensity. So if that's the case, I would recommend performing them at the start of the session. As I said, if you think 20 minutes on a bike is going to ruin the rest of your session, you need to spend more time on the bike. And then finally, you have timed rests, interval work, barbell complexes, blood shunting, and dynamic strongman events. So guys, I hope you enjoyed the video on 6 conditioning strategies for strength athletes, or how to improve your conditioning without it interfering with strength. It would be a huge help if you could leave a like on the video below, and also leave a comment if you have any questions about different methods of implementing cardiovascular training within your current regimen. Or if you have any ideas of your own about how you would implement conditioning, please leave them in the comments below, and it'd be great to have a chat about it. As always, stay strong.